Sarah had gotten a new job in a small town and was looking for a home. The young woman was evaluating several housing offers when a local man approached her.
"Excuse me, miss,"
the man began.
"I hear you're looking for a house. I can't help but think of a property north of town, about a scant 10-minute walk from here. It's beautiful, and people have told me that the house is at an incredible price."
Sarah looked interested, but the man's expression turned grim as he continued.
"However, the reason for its affordability is a tragedy that occurred there just 2 months ago. It belongs to a man known as Mr. Ming. 3 years ago, he lost his wife to illness. Since then, he fell into a deep depression while caring for his only son."
The villager's eyes clouded and his voice took on a deeper tone.
"They say that misfortune broke out when Mr. Ming's son took a bracelet that had belonged to his deceased mother. The father found out and, upon returning home, locked his son in the bathroom and brutally hit his arm with a hammer, the same arm where he carried the jewel."
Sarah's gaze was filled with horror as she imagined such a scene. The villager's voice cracked as he continued to recount the dark details.
"The only certainty we have is that Mr. Ming was arrested and confessed to having murdered his son, burying him in a nearby mountain. However, everything happened in the dead of night and he doesn't remember precisely the exact location. Despite an extensive search by authorities, the child's body was never found."
The villager's words left her uneasy, but also aroused her curiosity. The house, with its tragic history, exerted a strange attraction on her, like a mystery to be revealed. She decided to talk to the real estate agency to find out the price and see it. It had all the necessary points to choose it: good location, large, and a good price. So she didn't think about it anymore and decided to rent Mr. Ming's house. The days passed quietly for Sarah at her new job. The small village was friendly and welcoming, and her job was perfect. Her partner, Amanda, became her best friend, sharing laughter and conversation as they accomplished their tasks. One day, while they were finishing their day, Amanda invited her to spend the rest of the afternoon together at her apartment. They could watch a movie, chat, and even play some music. Although she warned her that her neighbors were quite picky about noise, they had to be careful and control the volume. Sarah smiled and suggested that they go to her house. There, they wouldn't have complaints about the noise. Her friend seemed uneasy and her gaze became serious. She was a little afraid to enter that house after the rumors that were circulating in the town. But Sarah reassured her by playing it off. She assured her that these were just urban legends created to scare children. She had been installed for several days and there was nothing strange about it. Amanda still seemed reluctant, but finally agreed at her friend's insistence. When they arrived, Sarah went into her room to change her clothes and noticed that there was a big draft inside. She remembered having meticulously closed each of the windows. Suddenly, the bathroom door in her room slammed shut, making the young woman jump in fright. With unsteady steps, she approached inside and took the opportunity to clean her face with cold water. When she turned off the tap, she heard strange and mysterious knocks, a click, click that resonated without being able to determine its origin. Furthermore, a nauseating smell began to fill the air, as if something was rotting. Sarah's senses were heightened by these strange phenomena. The draft of cold air, the disturbing slam on the door, and the mysterious sounds made her shiver uncontrollably. She returned to the living room where her friend was waiting for her and explained what had happened. Amanda nodded seriously and said, "That must be the boy's spirit. Makes sense, doesn't it? His father killed him in that bathroom." Sarah remained unconvinced by the stories about the ghost boy, but the uneasy feeling persisted. After a brief silence, she decided to ask her to stay the night with her that day. Amanda didn't love the idea, but seeing that her friend was scared, she finally agreed. Upon entering the room, Amanda immediately noticed the unusual cold and draft. Suddenly, the bathroom door slammed shut, causing the two young women to simultaneously scream.
Alarmed, they headed to the bathroom where the bad smell Sarah had mentioned was noticeable in the air. Although they didn't hear the mysterious noises, the heavy atmosphere and the stench of rot made it clear that something unusual was happening. They decided to spend the night in separate rooms. Sarah curled up in her bed while Amanda settled in the living room, away from the bathroom that had sparked her concern. The clock ticked slowly, and when the hands showed 4 a.m., Sarah woke up startled by the frigid air flowing under the bathroom door, even though it was firmly closed. Sarah covered herself with a blanket and got up. As she was about to touch the knob, a heartbreaking cry echoed from inside the room. She quickly headed to the living room where Amanda was resting. With her heart pounding, Sarah shared with her what had happened. She asked her friend to accompany her to the bathroom to listen to the cries that had filled the room. But Amanda resisted, regretting having given in to spending the night there. She remained firm in her belief that the boy's spirit had haunted the house since his father had killed him. She feared that angering the spirits would be a terrible thing, and she advised her to find another place to live and leave the little boy's soul in peace. However, Sarah explained the difficult economic situation she was in. She couldn't afford to look for another home. Amanda, fighting her fears and doubts, finally agreed. They both left the living room and headed to the room where the inexplicable events had occurred. When they approached the bathroom door, they heard nothing. Only the cold wind that blew under the door. Amanda looked at Sarah, who claimed that she had heard a child's cries. She tried to console her by suggesting that perhaps it had been a nightmare, but the young woman was sure of what she had heard. It had not been the fruit of her imagination. With slow steps and clasped hands, they moved fearfully towards the bathroom door, tense for what they might find behind it. Upon arrival, Sarah, driven by a mix of bravery and desperation, flung open the door and turned on the bathroom light. Amanda, covering her eyes with one hand, looked through her fingers. However, to their surprise, they found absolutely nothing and no one. Everything was in order. Amanda sighed in relief and released Sarah's hand, both of them having left nail marks due to the previous tension. In an apologetic tone, Amanda acknowledged that she had been the one who had disturbed her with the story of Mr. Ming's son, and that, in the end, it had only succeeded in frightening her and giving her nightmares. For her part, Sarah also apologized to her friend for having woken her up in vain, admitting that at that moment she had felt real fear. The two hugged each other and wished each other good night. Before going to bed, Sarah turned on the faucet and cooled her face to remove the sweat. However, her brief relief faded as soon as she heard the disturbing click, click she had heard earlier again. She quickly alerted her friend, who was still walking out the bedroom door, and informed her that the sound was ringing again. Amanda returned immediately, and Sarah motioned for her to be quiet, sealing her lips with a finger in a gesture of urgency. The two women, in complete silence, listened to the noises that filled the bathroom. Their gazes were lost in terror. And suddenly, a sudden draft slammed the bathroom door shut with such force that it got stuck, causing another wave of screams from the two young women. They began to bang on the door violently, looking for an escape route. Time passed slowly as the two tried in vain to open the door and scream for help, but there was no response from outside. The only company in the bathroom were the disturbing click-clicks and the persistent, nauseating smell that filled the air. Sarah struggled to stay calm and find an explanation for everything that was happening. With her nails broken and bloody from her desperate attempts to open the door, she was in an internal conflict. She blamed herself for putting Amanda in that situation, but at the same time, she felt relieved to not be alone in that chilling moment. Sarah's crying filled the bathroom as the cries echoed through the room again. Amanda, also gripped by terror, screamed for answers. "What do you want from us? What is our fault for everything that happened to you with your father?" Suddenly, a strange feeling came over Sarah when she noticed her friend's hair moving subtly as she sat next to the toilet. She wiped away her tears and finally asked her to move aside. Confused, Amanda asked why, but she complied with her request and moved. Sarah noticed that her hair had stopped moving. This left her intrigued, and she began to examine the toilet. It was then that she noticed a small slot protruding from behind the toilet, through which she could feel a draft of cold air and the unfamiliar smell she had been sensing in the room. The young woman began to think and linked the air currents in the house with that hole behind the toilet. Her friend, bewildered and anxious, asked her what she was doing, and Sarah asked her to help her move the toilet. Together, they moved the toilet to the side, revealing a hole large enough for a person to squeeze through. Amanda, growing increasingly nervous, expressed her bewilderment over the presence of the hole and asked what it was, to which Sarah decisively replied, "An exit." The idea of abandoning Amanda in the bathroom and venturing alone into a dark hallway didn't sit well with her friend, who became nervous and begged her not to leave her alone. However, Sarah tried to make her understand that the only solution for both of them was for her to venture into the passage. She grabbed a box of matches from the bathroom drawer and slid through the hole. As she walked through the darkness, she had a conversation with Amanda. However, little by little, Sarah stopped hearing any sound coming from the bathroom, falling into an eerie silence. The smell became more nauseating as she went, and she began to consider turning back as the tunnel seemed to lead her nowhere. But then, the cries were heard with more intensity. Fighting the fear that overwhelmed her, she decided to continue advancing on all fours, while the cries grew louder, even though she didn't seem to be any closer to an exit. In an instant, her hand found no ground and she rushed downwards through some kind of pipe. She fell into a puddle, and although most of the matches were wet, she managed to light the last one she had left. To greater horror, she realized that she was on the skeleton of a rat. She let out a terrified scream, and before she could recover, she heard more noises coming from her right. Cautiously, she followed the sounds until she suddenly spotted a moving figure in the distance. She approached it slowly, with a bruised ankle and a cut on her eyebrow from the fall in the tunnel. As she got closer, she realized the terrifying truth. The creature writhing and moaning on the floor was Mr. Ming's son, the boy who had been chained and brutally injured by his own father. The boy was still wearing the chains and shackles that had been used to bind and beat him. The boy's limp, mangled arm was infected and rotting, attached to his body for months, slowly decomposing. The horrible smell of putrefaction that Sarah had smelled was due to those macabre wounds. Mr. Ming, in his madness, had thrown the boy's body into the tunnel, believing him to be dead. However, the boy had survived in inhumane conditions, feeding on insects, rodents, and water from puddles formed by leaks from the house's pipes. That had kept him alive, although he looked like a walking skeleton. Sarah, with her heart filled with horror and tears in her eyes, finally understood the truth behind the house's mysteries. The cries that both she and the villagers had heard at night were the cries of the child seeking for help. The nauseating smell was his decomposing arm, and the mysterious click she had heard was produced by the little boy, hitting the pipes with his chains every time he heard someone using the faucet. He was just trying to send signals that there was someone there. Sarah looked at the boy with a mixture of compassion and sadness. In an instant, the fear vanished completely, replaced by overwhelming grief. She approached the little boy and tenderly caressed his face, murmuring words of comfort. "Don't worry, you're not alone anymore. Let's get out of here," she said in a soft voice. A tear rolled down the boy's cheek as she looked at him. The little boy tried to stand up, but his fragile and scrawny body wouldn't allow him. Sarah grabbed him and carried him toward the tunnel entrance, hoping Amanda was nearby. However, before arriving, the boy spoke his last words. "My mother was the one who protected me all this time. I owe everything to her." Then he closed his eyes and stopped breathing. Sarah desperately tried to wake him, but it was too late. Carefully, she placed the little boy's lifeless body on the ground. Before leaving, Sarah held a match to the boy's arm and noticed the bracelet he was wearing. It was the same bracelet he had taken from his mother. At that moment, she understood the true reason behind the boy's words. The bracelet had been his amulet, his source of strength and hope during his time in the dark tunnel. That jewel had been a link with his mother, who had taken care of him until someone rescued him. Finally, some neighbors who were walking nearby heard Amanda's desperate screams and called the police. They managed to rescue them both, as well as the remains of the child. When the news that the little boy had been alive all this time reached Mr. Ming, he was devastated. He stopped eating and slowly wasted away to the bone, dying in a last act of remorse. In his farewell letter, he expressed that what he had loved most in his life was his wife, and that he had gotten rid of the last part of her he had left, his son. He hoped that from beyond, the two of them would forgive him for the horrors he had committed. He would suffer a death as lonely and terrible as the one he had imposed on his own son.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!